Welcome to B2B Sales Trends, the podcast dedicated to sales leaders in the B2B space, where we share conversations about innovative and successful sales transformations to keep you up to date on the latest trends. This podcast is brought to you by Global Performance Group.
Welcome yet to another fabulous episode of the B2B Sales Trends podcast, my dear people. The show that brings you hacks, tips, thought leadership for sales, marketing, and customer success. It's brought to you by Global Performance Group. We are a revenue improvement boutique that implements behavior change to provide salespeople the competence of the skills, the confidence to execute these well, and the courage to sell and negotiate based on customer outcomes. We solve three problems for our customers, which is we're increasing their win rates, we are reducing their sales cycle, and we are protecting margins in the process. My name is Kendlbacher, and today I have with me Todd Rotger. If I pronounce this correctly, if not, you have to correct me. You're the CRO of Saviynt. Two difficult things to pronounce. Welcome to the B2B Sales Trends podcast, Todd.
Thank you, Harry. Happy to be here. And pronunciation is Rotger. So close, but I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Absolutely. As a form of introduction, Todd, give us a little bit of an intro of your journey in terms of within enterprise sales and how you led your company to where they are currently now. Very ambitious company. We'll talk about that in a second. You've implemented some fabulous things. So give us a little bit of an intro about yourself and your organization, if you would.
Sure. I think, I've been a seller, been involved in sales my entire professional career in or around sales. Actually started in sales in college, in what would be inside sales or kind of telemarketing at the time. That was my first itch into thinking this is something I enjoy and something I want to pursue. When I graduated from college, I got into outside sales. When I got into tech, it was really at a great time. Tech was really booming. I got into tech sales and cybersecurity, and I've been very fortunate to work for a lot of great public companies, CA, McAfee, Mercury, HP, VMware, ServiceNow, and then now at Saviynt. So I think it's been, for me, getting to the role of Chief Revenue Officer, it's been something that I've always been interested in being a sales leader, wasn't always sure at what level. And then I think as I progressed and saw some great sales leaders throughout my career, I really had the itch to lead an organization at an executive level. And I think the other thing is I kind of, once I started thinking along those lines, I really planned for that. And so I worked my career around how do I get to the next level, the next role, to be able to get me prepared or qualified to get to where I wanted to go. So that's a bit of a history on how I got here.
Thank you for that introduction. We've chatted before. It's a couple of weeks back now. Scaling your organization, Saviynt, is really key part of your strategy going forward. And I know you've been extremely important and instrumental in growing the company's annual recurring revenue. Share a little bit about these key strategies, or some of the changes that you had to implement to achieve that remarkable growth. I don't know. I'm not naming any numbers. I'm not sure if we can do that. Feel free if that's okay for you, but don't feel like you have to. So, tremendous growth anyway for our listeners. But share with me, what were those key strategies and changes you've implemented?
Yeah, I think it changes as you're going through those stages of growth. So when I came in to Saviynt a little over 4 years ago, we were at the stage at about 40 million in ARR, and had certainly, been to a point where had seen some success, had done some really good things as a company, and was really looking to kind of get to scale to the next level. But then as you go, there's things that you need to do when you're in that stage versus when you get to 100 million, when you get to 150 million. So along the way, that changes a little bit. I think what's really important, and when I came in with a plan, a playbook, kind of a program on how to, run the business, how to build and scale a revenue organization. We knew there were things that we were going to do in the first 12 months that we made priority. And then, really making sure that you've got a plan in place that can be measured, that can be tracked, and that you can communicate that, I think was really important, because I get, a lot of CRO roles out there that are open and available. And I think a lot of times it's coming in with a plan that you can get your executive team, your board to agree to. Here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to do it. Here's how we're going to measure it. This is what we should expect along the way, and try to stick to that as much as possible. And I think it really comes down to, when you're building this out, having a plan. The plan is really driven by, the people. So, the people that you've got, that you're building in the organization, the process that you're building, how do you get people working so that they can be more productive and more effective? And then your alignment, making sure that you've got the right alignment. And so as you're going through different stages of growth, those things are changing. The people that you have, at 40 million in ARR a lot of them are different than, and the needs are different when you're at 150 million. So I think it's a combination of those things, having a good plan that is well understood, and then being able to on that and measure it as you go.
I'd love to learn more about that playbook that you have mentioned there. Maybe that could be a separate podcast at some point in the future, but very, very interesting. One of the things that you've mentioned, and I don't know if that's part of your playbook, that'll be interesting, is a big challenge is to get people to think differently in this process, because of that massive scale and massive growth, people need to also transfer the way they're thinking, especially shifting from, a product talk to an outcome-based conversation with clients. How have you engaged? First of all, how have you achieved that shall I say, that shift within your sales team? How have they been complied to it, and what impact has it had on your sales strategy?
Yeah, that's a very important part of scale. And if you really think about it, in the earlier stages for companies, your differentiation is typically more about your product and feature differentiation, right? As a small company, you've got something that's different than what the other. So you're really focused on that. How do you get people aligned around, and how can you position and sell your differentiation that's very product and feature focused? As you continue to grow as a company and you become, more of an enterprise company, maybe you start to become more of a multi-product company, it changes to be more around your solution, a fuller solution, and value and outcomes that you're providing, right? That's the big shift that you need to go through. It can't be a better mousetrap forever, right? You've got to be able to drive value when you start to work with bigger organizations. They're looking for long-term partnerships, outcomes, and it's less about feature function. So I think that's a big part of it. What we've done, and this has been a big part of what we've been doing over the past probably 5 quarters, is really internally, we've developed a value management organization that is focused around that, working with our teams on how do we really put together and understand the value that we're preparing for our new prospects. How are we getting value from our customers that we can show? And so we've put a group together for that. We've brought a product in called Ecosystems that we use, and it's really helped our organization understand how do we position what the value of this is versus just, how we're different from a product standpoint.
It's a very interesting conversation, one that I have almost every day. And, the research says people make decisions for one out of 2 reasons, right? Either to avoid a risk or to gain an outcome. And really, if you want to sell solutions effectively, you really need to choose that path of, okay, I'll help you make a decision based on the outcomes that we can create together. But that really needs to have a mindset and a skill set in the people who are in front of your clients. Is really an important part of it. It's fundamental differently, very different to how you sold as a product, right?
Yeah. And I think, as you go from as you grow as an organization, initially you've got something in your product that is differentiated from what the rest of the market has. And you get really focused in probably selling to a buyer where that's really important to them, right? As you grow and you start to get into maybe bigger solutions, multi-product, you're going up in the organization. And so you're selling to a different buyer. If you're selling to a CISO or a CIO, they're less concerned about the actual product. They're concerned about the vendor that they're going to be doing business with. And can they deliver? Can they be a good partner? Do they have the ecosystem that can help them be successful? So it really shifts, I think, as you go, and you need to make sure that the organization is making those changes to be able to meet that demand.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with you. We chatted before a little bit about this, your leadership team and the collaboration amongst the leadership team, and the idea of that CRO and CMO, Chief Revenue Officer, Chief Marketing Officer relationship. Working closely with the Chief Marketing Officer is something that I heard you say is really important. Could you share a little bit about those best practices that you have experienced and learned and hopefully share with others between the CRO and CMO, especially in the context of aligning sales with marketing efforts? How crucial is that? Share your experience with the listeners here a bit.
Yeah, I think it's very important. We were fortunate to get a new CMO last fall. That's a very experienced, outstanding CMO. And so I think that partnership's really important. And I think culturally, when you really think about it and looking at it, it's that sales and marketing connection that is your, really your top of the funnel, your demand generation. It's building the awareness, the brand awareness. And it's really important that you build a culture that these two teams are really tightly aligned. And I've seen it in companies where it's this kind of sales versus marketing, and sales complains about marketing and marketing complains about sales. And it's really important, I think, because the way I look at the overall go-to-market strategy, it's a combination of those things. And my relationship to develop and deliver revenue, when I look at marketing, marketing number one is helping us build new pipeline, really create top of the funnel pipeline, as well as building that brand awareness that really helps us get people to understand who is Saviynt, how are we differentiated. I think that's really important. And then I think it's just getting integration and the culture of those two teams together. So thinking through how is your marketing team aligned around your revenue team, your sales team, I think is important. And having that relationship with the CMO to say, let's get these teams aligned so that we can work better, more collaboratively together. And I think on my side too, as I'm thinking about going into new markets, doing different things, the CMO has to be part of that. Like if we think of, we're going into the Middle East, we're expanding in Japan, these types of things, I need to have those conversations with her to get her opinion on what are the things that we should be looking at? Maybe where do we have some risk? Maybe there's different ways of doing things that I'm thinking through. And so I think that's the type of relationship that you can foster, that close-knit culture between sales and marketing to really get the value from it. Absolutely vital
that those two functioning hand in hand together nicely. Absolutely. You've emphasized a little bit the importance of, I heard you say, clearing the road, in quotes, clearing the road for sales teams. Elaborate a little bit on that and share with the listeners, what that means and what your interpretation of that is.
Yeah, I think in my role as a revenue leader, I really think of it, there's two main areas. It's my role in the C-suite to make sure that, I'm helping the company in strategic directions. And then it's my role over the revenue organization to make sure that that is functioning at the highest level that it can be. And I think when I say things like clearing the road, it's really the way I'm thinking about how do I do things and get things in a place to make it easier for us to do business, make it easier for my teams to do business, whether it's our partners, make it easier on our customers. And so clearing the road in a lot of the time, in a lot of the cases, is really understanding how can I do things to make us, go faster, be easier to work with. And so that could be working with our C-suite, whether it's the product leader, marketing, finance, understanding what are the things that are holding us back? How can I put, process in place? How can I make changes? And what I really want to be able to do is create a foundation that makes it simple and easy, whether it's aligning teams or it's putting in process or tools to make us go faster. I want our teams that are in the field to spend time with customers and prospects, to be doing that. And then I want to be able to make those things that they're doing easier so that we can maximize their productivity. And so I really think about those things are, what are the things that I can be doing to make sure we're getting that higher level of productivity throughout the organization.
Through thinking like your past experience, you can really tell you come from sales originally with that kind of thinking. You know, all the obstacles out of the way for salespeople to really do what they intend to do, right? Spend time in front of the client, right? Very interesting. Let's talk a little bit about that scaling part. You believe that SaaS companies within the 100 to 500 million ARR range face similar challenges, and it maybe have something to do with what you referred earlier with the playbook part of that. So similar challenges for companies, annual recurring revenue between 100 and 500 mil. Share with us the challenges that you see a little bit more in detail and how you and your company have addressed those to stay ahead of the competition.
I think you go through, when you're in this range, typically companies are going from probably being a single product early on into more of a multi-product solution, especially in SaaS now, right? You really have these platforms and companies are building out multi-product SaaS platforms. And so that's a big change going from, I'm the expert on this single product and here's how we're going to position it. And everything in the company goes behind this single product. And so I think there's a shift there that goes into more of a mindset around a bigger, more broad solution that's multi-product. I think that's one of them. I think, I talked about it earlier, but kind of moving from that feature and product differentiation into more solution and value. I think that's part of it. But another part of it is really just scale. So, you're really looking at how do we scale this organization to drive the level of growth. And so driving scale, you have to really be able to look at how do we drive productive scale, sustainable scale? What are the things that we want to invest in? You want to make sure that you're making investments of your time, of your people, of your resources in places that it's going to pay off. So you have to make sure that you don't try to do too many things too quickly. I think that's what a lot of companies do. You want to make sure that you're in your core and you're getting the most out of your core markets before you try to get into too many different things. And so I think having some level of focus there is really important. And then really, if you think about it, the organizational change is really different when you're going through those stages. And so you're getting, probably different types of people coming into the organization. You're getting different skill sets that are coming in, and you've got to be able to build that culture where people understand, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, here's why it's good for you, here's why it's good for the company. So I think there's a lot of cultural shift that happens.
Let's talk a little bit of sharing your experiences and turning it into advice for sales leaders, especially when they want to scale their businesses too. Based on the successful experience in scaling Saviynt's revenue and all the expansion globally that you've had, what advice would you give to sales leaders aiming to do similar things such as growth and scale in their organization?
I think for revenue leaders, whether it's at the CRO level or some levels below it, I know at the CRO level, and I think it's important at every level, but having a plan and a playbook, and that's one thing that has been very important to me. And even when I'm hiring leaders and I'm interviewing, I have them put together, a plan and walk me through their plan and how do they think about things. But at the CRO level, it's critical. Even as you come in and you're getting hired, you're being hired by a board and a CEO for the most part. And what you need to be able to do is show them that you have a plan to be able to create a consistent, sustainable revenue organization that can be predictable. That's really what they want. And so the way you do that is by showing them, here's a plan that I have on how we're going to do it, how I've done it before, and really making sure that you can communicate that you're measuring it. And as you go along, you're looking at it saying, here's where we're at. This is where I said we would be. Here's where we're at. Here's what's working or not working. Here's where we might need some extra help. But I think it's that, having the plan, having it consistently communicated throughout the organization, being able to measure it is super important, especially as you get to a CRO role, because, that companies just won't have patience if you don't have results. So you need to have a plan that people are clearly aligned to. I would say the other thing is, it really is, in my opinion, it's prioritizing people and talent. I just can't say enough about that. You just have to be relentless on the people and the talent in the organization, because that is the one thing in tech that can move you the fastest is really the battle for talent. And so making sure that you've got the right people, the best people that you can get, is critically important. And I think sometimes, leaders don't make decisions quick enough on people and on talent. And that's something that I think makes the biggest difference of anything I could really look at. I mentioned a little bit about, I think chasing too many things, really sticking to your core. I think a lot of times companies will try to go too wide, too fast. It's like, we're having some success here, so let's go try to do some, 20 different things or do it in 10 different new markets. Stay and have success where you're having success, and then look at where you can build and then have a plan to be able to do that. But don't move out of core kind of markets that are working too quickly. And another one I would just say is making decisions and making changes quickly. Like, you can't wait. I think just waiting really kills people, especially in these roles. You have to have a plan together so that you understand what you want to do. You've got to be able to get the data that you need. You've got to be able to kind of have the feeling that you need, but you've got to make decisions and you've got to act. And then, it's really, how do you build for scale? So you need to be able to think out past the quarter. The truth is, we're measured in 90-day increments. And so you've got to be able to produce, and you've got to be able to be tactical in the quarter, but you've got to be strategic and think about the next 12 months, the next 18 months or 24 months. How are we going to build this? How are we going to scale this? And are we doing the right things to get us where we need to be? So it's tricky. It's not easy. It's not for everyone. But those are the things, that I've done and I've focused on.
Love it. What a big bucket of insights there. Fabulous. My final question to you, Todd, is the question I always finish up every podcast as we are coming to the end, is in line with what you've shared with people and talent are being so important. And obviously this is a B2B Sales Trends podcast. Let's talk about what the top talent in sales need to have. More concretely, what do you think are the top 3 skills, top 3 behaviors that salespeople need to have to really be at an elite level? What would those top 3 be?
If I think of, the top 3 things of the best sellers, that I've worked with, I would say number 1 is listening. Be an active listener, be a good listener. I think there's a big difference between top reps and how they can listen and understand and problem solve versus the rest. That to me is something that I think people don't talk about that or think about that a lot, but when you really look at the qualities and characteristics of top sellers, they're typically very good listeners. They're understanding, they're thinking through what is the problem that the prospect or the client has, how can we solve that, and how can I put, the messaging and the team around that to be able to differentiate. So I think listening is hugely important, being just a really good listener. Look, a simple one is activity. I would say of the top sellers, there's very few that I would consider top sellers that haven't had high levels of activity. It's just, you need to have it. You need to be active, and there's a lot of different ways to be active. You can be active and be smart in the way you're doing it, or you can just run around and be active. But I think activity, it's hard to be a top performer, a top sales performer, and not have a high level of activity. And then I think the third one is really around, I think it's more of a kind of a personal thing, but it's kind of this idea of being able to really grind, being able to push through tough times, tough circumstances. When you go through, that's the end of a quarter right now, right? And so we're in a lot of these deals at the end of the quarter. Things change all the time. You need to be able to have, to be able to kind of think through things, to be calm enough to get through, find different ways around issues, to solve problems differently, but just to be able to keep going and grind and really be able to battle through it, because you're always going to face tough times. You're always going to face challenges. And I think top performers have a way of being able to just kind of grind through it and figure out how to get around the issues that come up.
So interesting when I listen to that, and you bring the not just the experience, but you've been there, done that. You've seen enough people come and go. And when I look at your top three here, right, they're not really rocket science, are they? You got to listen well. You got to have the right activity, and you got to work really hard and grind through this. We always talk about these wonderful, elegant skills that people need to have and so forth. It's all rocket science, right? You just got to be really good at that. And so interesting, so interesting. Todd, thank you. I know our listeners will very, very much appreciate your insights and thought leadership on the topics that you have shared. And thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Harry. I've enjoyed it.
Well, community of listeners, 2 calls to action, my dear people. Share this podcast with people you think would benefit from Todd's great insights here. Second is go to globalperformancegroup.com, sign up to the Global Sales Portal, which will give you free access to webinars, podcasts, and all other many wonderful content pieces that will help you in the B2B selling world. So think about listening, think about activity, and think about grinding. Until the next time, look after yourself. Bye-bye.